Hear ye, hear ye! Let all the good people of TripleJump hear this proclamation! For every famous fantasy kingdom that we explore within a video game, it follows that there would be a king attached to it. I mean, it's in the name after all, so it just makes sense. A kingdom without a king would just be dumb. However, not all monarchs are created equal. Many are simply faceless quest givers whose main concern seems to be enlisting whatever random youth happens to be walking by into saving the world. Others are wicked and despotic tyrants, ruling over the cowering masses until they are finally cast out by a great hero, who also usually happens to be a random youth. I'm sensing a pattern here. But for every evil or ineffectual ruler, there's another king out there who actually deserves the title, whether it's for their benevolence, wisdom, or great deeds. And these are the kings that are worth celebrating. To be clear, not all of these kings are good, per se, but they are all great in their own ways. So from this day henceforth, let all these monarchs be judged. I'm Ashton from TripleJump, and here are the 10 best kings in gaming. Number 10, Marth, Fire Emblem series. The Fire Emblem series has more young noble lords and ladies than you can shake a sword at, but of them all, there are none more noble or blue-haired than the original himself, Marth. Or as those of us outside Japan knew him, the guy from Super Smash Bros. Melee. Marth begins his adventure as a simple prince of the kingdom of Altea, forced to take up arms after his father is slain and his kingdom engulfed in war. Through his courage and strong sense of justice, Marth brings together an army of unlikely allies to retake his home and, in classic princely fashion, slays a dragon, marries a princess, and ascends to the throne of Altea. Despite only being the main character of the first 2 Fire Emblem games and their respective remakes, Marth's legacy is one that stretches across the entire timeline, and even in Fire Emblem Awakening, set 2,000 years later, he is revered as the mystical Hero King. He's probably revered less for his time seated upon the throne, and more for how he won it, but for that alone he deserves to be remembered as a great king. And he did it all whilst looking fantastic in a cape. Number 9, King Dedede, the Kirby series. Speak softly and carry a big stick is an old saying about how to be an effective leader, and if you're satisfied with one out of the 2, then Dedede is the right bird for the job. King Dedede is the ruler of Dreamland, a sleepy little kingdom where there's a quiet, peaceful place to live whenever it's not having all its denizens turned into robots or being terrorized by eldritch horrors from beyond the stars. At first glance, Dedede is nothing more than a lazy, gluttonous oaf who does just as much to harm his kingdom as any other villain. But take a closer look, and you'll see that he's still a lazy, gluttonous oaf, but one with a heart of gold deep down inside. Dedede does spend much of his time engaging in a one-sided rivalry with the heroic Kirby, but he's just as often willing to put his feelings aside to join forces with his nemesis when there are greater threats to face. His track record certainly isn't as great as Kirby's, and he does have a rather annoying tendency to be brainwashed, mind-controlled, or possessed by the baddies, but when push comes to shove, King Dedede always brings the hammer down in the right place. Number 8, Kain, Legacy of Kain series. You don't have to be a good king to be a great king, or even a particularly nice guy at that, but you do have to have a really cool sword. Case in point, Kain, conqueror of Nosgoth and wielder of the Soul Reaver. Kain's story begins simply enough, when he finds himself murdered by assassins and brought back to life as a vampire. But things get complicated when he's enlisted to destroy 9 corrupted guardians and restore life to the land. A bit ironic for someone who just joined the ranks of the undead, perhaps, but he is offered a cure should he be successful. As his story unfolds, Kain instead embraces his newfound powers and leads his vampire brethren in a war against the humans, eventually becoming the despotic ruler of Nosgoth. While his motivations are questionable and his morality ambiguous at best, one aspect of Kain that cannot be denied is the scope of his ambition. The tale of Kain is one that spans centuries, as he seeks a way to conquer not just his homeland, but his own fate, defying the destiny that's been laid out before him. And for being able to accomplish what he set out to do, as well as ruling an empire for a millennium, Kain is one vampire who doesn't suck. Number 7. Edgar, Final Fantasy VI. The simple coin flip is the ultimate symbol of chance, the great equaliser that has settled everything from who gets to eat the last slice of cake to which team gets to kick the ball first. It has also, in at least one case, been used to decide who becomes king. Edgar and his brother Sabin were not only twins, but the heirs to the throne of Figaro, destined to rule side by side when their father passed away. The only problem, neither one of them actually wanted to do it. Yes, in an interesting turn of fate, two princes fought not over who gets to become king, but who would get to shirk the responsibility. Ultimately, the choice came down to a flip of a coin, and thus Edgar was chosen to succeed the throne while Sabin was free to follow his dreams. What Sabin didn't know was that Edgar rigged the toss with a double-sided coin to ensure that his brother would be free of the responsibilities of ruling. This act of self-sacrifice is what marks Edgar as a king of true quality. But hey, don't feel bad for the guy. He was still able to pursue his own passions as an inventor. Ain't nobody gonna argue against a king with a bloody chainsaw, after all. Number 6. Korobo, Little King's Story. What is the most defining trait of a king? Is it wealth, a noble lineage, wearing a crown, or having a beard? Turns out it's none of those things. All you need to do to be a king is make people listen to you. And nobody does that better than Korobo. At the beginning of the story, the little king is nothing more than a little boy, until he stumbles upon a magical crown that grants him the power to charm anybody into obeying his every command. Korobo is then promptly crowned the ruler of Alpoco and put in charge of managing, growing and defending his newfound kingdom, along with attending to other kingly duties like courting princesses and conquering enemies, all in a day's work for the young monarch. The manner of Korobo's ascension to the throne may be a bit on the iffy side, but you can't argue with results, and throughout his reign, he's able to keep all his citizens happy and safe from their enemies. He's also able to build a flying machine capable of space travel, so he's clearly a patron of the sciences as well. And he's cute as a button to boot. Number 5. Arthas Menethil, Warcraft series. The usual turn of phrase when someone becomes a king is to say that they ascended to the throne. However, in certain cases, it may be more accurate to say that they descended to the throne. Once upon a time, Arthas Menethil was a hero to the people, heir to the city of Lordaeron, a paladin of the highest order, and champion in the war against the undead scourge. And yet, it all came crashing down when he sought to destroy the undead by taking up the sword Frostmourne, only to lose his soul and become the very evil that he was sworn to fight against, ruling over the undead as the Lich King. As a fallen hero turned villain, Arthas is a controversial figure. To some, he is nothing more than an enemy, but to others, there is still a spark of nobility left in his dead heart. Is he a conquering tyrant, or is he the secret hero who sacrificed himself to keep the true evil at bay? None can say for sure, but the real reason Arthas makes this list is because he's a king of rock and roll, baby! Bet you didn't know that sword is also an axe. Let's see Kain try and do that with his cool sword. Number 4. Kisk, the Guilty Gear series. I would like to take a minute to explain to you what the plot of Guilty Gear is about, but since we can't make this video 6 hours long, the abridged version will have to suffice for now. During the 100-year-long war between humans and the genetically engineered living weapons known as Gears, Kisk joined the Holy Order of Knights at the age of 10, became its commander when he was 16, and brought an end to the war only 3 years after that. Following a stint as a member of the International Police Force, Kai was elected as one of the 3 kings of the newly created Kingdom of Illyria. I'm pretty sure that's not how kings are supposed to ascend to the throne, but who are we to argue with the democratic process? The people chose well, as even though Kai had his fair share of missteps and failures as king, suffering a few embarrassing defeats and being called a terrible king by his own son, it can never be said that he wasn't a man who practiced what he preached, as his ideals of peaceful coexistence between humans and gears were based off the fact that his own wife was a gear herself. And if loving your wife is a crime, then Kai is guilty as charged. Number 3. King of Hyrule, The Legend of Zelda series. Watch out! Looks like we've got a bit of a wild card entry! The King of Hyrule is not one singular man, but a title passed down through many characters across the series, though they do share many similarities. They're all burly men, they all sport a rather luxurious beard, and they all, presumably, share a love of dinner. In older Zelda titles, the king's role was usually limited to the odd mention in the instruction manual as an unseen coordinator of events in the backstory, or as a victim of the new villain's nefarious machinations by being manipulated, impersonated, or just straight up murdered. Fortunately, later kings have more than made up for these shortcomings by taking a far more active role in Link's adventures. For example, by ferrying the young hero across the ocean in the guise of a talking boat, or teaching him how to fall with style using a paraglider. It would have been easy for the kings of Hyrule to remain as nothing more than background figures, but instead they stepped up and actually got off their throne to be right in the thick of it, in some cases, literally. Whether by land, sea, or air, the kings of Hyrule are monarchs worth fighting for, if they're not already doing it themselves. Number 2, King of All Cosmos, Katamari series. Everybody makes mistakes from time to time, and no matter who you are, you're always bound to slip up at some point. But when most of us drop the ball, the only consequence is maybe a broken plate or a stern word from our boss. When you're the ruler of the entire universe, well, the stakes are just a tad bit higher. There's not much you can say about the King of All Cosmos that isn't right there in the name, except for his unfortunate destructive tendencies. While on a drunken bender one night, he accidentally eradicates all the stars in the sky and charges his own son with replacing them all. That all sounds rather bad, doesn't it? But I'm sure nobody noticed. The King of All Cosmos is an eccentric character, to say the least, and one who should probably practice a bit more restraint. But for all his faults, he's still quite the imposing figure, and beneath his bizarre monologues and strict parenting style, he's still a man with a good heart on the inside, as we can see through his relationship with his own father. And hey, he's enough of a family man to take his wife and son out to the beach for a lovely summer getaway, which lasted right up until he destroyed everything again. Gosh, some men never change. And number 1, Graham, the King's Quest series. No crown, no beard, and not even a cool sword. He may not look like much of a king on the outside, but make no mistake, they don't come any kinglier than Graham of Daventry. Unlike most kings, Graham isn't descended from noble blood. He was nothing more than a humble peasant, a bright-eyed young man with a head full of dreams and a cape full of pockets. But by overcoming a series of competitions against other would-be hopefuls, Graham earned the title of knight, and in turn becomes heir to the throne. In his day, Graham has seen and done it all. Defeated dragons, bested evil wizards, rescued at least one princess, recovered lost magic artifacts, brought peace to the land, and found time to book his family a nice holiday. What sets Graham apart from most other kings is that his greatest adventures don't happen on his way to the throne, but after he's already seated upon it. I mean, the game's not called Future King's Quest, you know? Graham is no warrior, and his battles are not won through strength of arms, but rather he chooses to protect Daventry and its people with wits, bravery, kindness, and a generous amount of reloading old save files.